The fine wasn't about the grass. It was about control. The envelope was taped to my front door at exactly 6:12 a.m. Bright orange. Like a warning flare. Final notice, $750 fine. Reason? My mailbox paint tone violates community aesthetic standards. I stood there in my slippers, staring at the exact same mailbox that had been approved 2 years ago. Same color. Same shape. Same everything. But this wasn't about paint. It was about the fact that 3 weeks earlier, I had questioned them. You see, during the last HOA meeting, I asked a simple question. Why did our maintenance fees increase 40% this year? The room went silent. Then came the smiles. Tight. Polite. Dangerous. And now this envelope sat on my door like retaliation. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, peeked through her curtains. She knew. Everyone knew. In this neighborhood, the HOA didn't just enforce rules. They made examples. And I had just been selected. But what they didn't know was that I keep records. And once I started digging, that $750 fine would become the most expensive mistake they ever made. The HOA president, Richard Halston, liked to run meetings like a courtroom. He sat at the center of the folding table like a judge. Polished watch. Fake calm voice. When I showed up to dispute the fine, he didn't even look surprised. He looked prepared. Standards are standards, he said smoothly. If we bend them for you, we bend them for everyone. A few board members nodded like trained birds. I slid the approval document across the table. Signed by the board. 2 years ago. Richard barely glanced at it. Guidelines evolve. The room chuckled. That was the moment I understood something. This wasn't incompetence. It was intimidation. They had fined 3 other homeowners in the last 2 months. 1 for excessive holiday lighting. 1 for visible trash bins. 1 elderly couple for unauthorized flower species. All of them paid. Because fighting back costs time. Energy. Stress. And they were counting on that. As I walked out, Richard called after me. You have 10 days before penalties double. The door closed behind me. And something inside me shifted. If they wanted a fight, I wasn't going to argue about paint. I was going to ask a much bigger question. Where was our money actually going? That night, I opened the HOA's publicly shared financial statements. At first glance, everything looked normal. Landscaping. Security. Maintenance. But then I noticed something strange. Our landscaping costs had doubled. Yet the grass in the common park was half dead. The pool had been renovated twice in 3 years. But nothing looked different. Then I saw it. Vendor name, Greenstone Property Services. Paid $187,000 last year. I Googled them. No website. No reviews. Just a P.O. box. That was odd. Very odd. Then I searched business registrations. Greenstone was registered to a private address. I zoomed in on the property record. My stomach dropped. It was Richard Halston's brother-in-law's house. Suddenly, the fine on my mailbox felt smaller. This wasn't petty rule enforcement. This was something else. Something bigger. And I had just stumbled into it. The next HOA meeting was packed. Not because of my fine. But because I had quietly printed copies of the vendor records. I didn't accuse. I asked questions. Can we clarify the ownership of Greenstone Services? Richard's smile froze. One board member avoided eye contact. Another shuffled papers nervously. It's standard outsourcing, Richard said calmly. So your brother-in-law winning a $187,000 contract was coincidence? Silence. Heavy. Uncomfortable. Then came the deflection. You're spreading misinformation. Are you qualified to interpret financials? Maybe focus on your mailbox. There it was. The attack strategy. Make me look unstable. But something unexpected happened. Mrs. Carter stood up. My fees went up too. For what? Then another neighbor. Then another. The silence cracked. Richard adjourned the meeting abruptly. But it was too late. The room had shifted. And now, they knew I knew. 3 days later, I received another notice. Unauthorized driveway pressure washing, $300. Then another. Improper curtain shade visibility, $150. They were flooding me. Trying to bury me. Trying to exhaust me. But every notice was documented. Every timestamp saved. I filed a formal records request under state HOA transparency law. They had 30 days to provide detailed financial records. On day 29, they delivered 3 binders. Messy. Unorganized. Intentionally confusing. But buried in those pages were inflated invoices, duplicate maintenance charges, and one shocking discovery. Greenstone had billed for snow removal. In July. That's when I stopped feeling angry. And started feeling strategic. I wasn't going to argue in meetings anymore. I was going to build a case. I contacted a forensic accountant. Paid out of pocket. Worth every cent. 2 weeks later, he called me. They've been cycling funds through shell vendors. How much? I asked. Over $600,000 in 4 years. My chest tightened. That wasn't mismanagement. That was organized. Calculated. Careful. I shared the findings with 5 trusted neighbors. We formed a coalition. Quiet. Patient. Prepared. Then we contacted a real estate attorney. And finally, we filed a formal complaint with the state regulatory board. Not about my fine. About financial fraud. And suddenly, the mailbox didn't matter anymore. The investigation hit like a storm. Auditors showed up unannounced. Bank records were subpoenaed. Board emails reviewed. Richard stopped smiling. At the emergency meeting, he looked smaller. Sweating. Defensive. When the state investigator asked about Greenstone's ownership, he hesitated. That hesitation was everything. Within weeks, 3 board members resigned. Richard stepped down for personal reasons. Accounts were frozen. And the neighborhood received a letter confirming financial misconduct under review. The same people who once laughed when I questioned a fine now avoided eye contact. The petty tyranny was cracking. And all I had done was ask for transparency. The fines against me? Dismissed. Publicly. With apology language carefully worded by lawyers. But something more important happened. The HOA bylaws were rewritten. Open financial audits required yearly. Vendor conflict disclosures mandatory. Term limits imposed. Neighbors who once whispered now spoke confidently. The culture shifted. Fear dissolved. And one evening, Mrs. Carter brought me cookies. They thought you'd just pay, she said. I almost did. That's the truth. I almost wrote the check. But sometimes injustice doesn't shout. It tests you quietly. And if you pay once, you teach them you always will. People think revenge is loud, explosive, emotional. But real revenge is documentation. Patience. Truth exposed in daylight. I never yelled. Never threatened. Never broke a rule. I simply followed theirs, better than they did. And when the final audit report was released, confirming misuse of community funds, I didn't celebrate. I sat on my porch, looking at my perfectly normal mailbox. The same one that started it all. And I felt something unexpected. Peace. A year later, our neighborhood feels different. Quieter. Healthier. Accountable. Sometimes I think about that first envelope. Bright orange. Meant to intimidate. Instead, it revealed something rotten underneath. They weaponized small rules to hide big corruption. But here's what they forgot. Paper leaves trails. Greed leaves patterns. And ordinary people, when pushed too far, start asking questions. This was never about paint. It was about power. And power, when unchecked, eventually exposes itself. If you're facing something similar, don't react emotionally. Document. Research. Stay calm. The system that intimidates you often fears one thing: transparency. They find the wrong homeowner. And in trying to silence one voice, they woke up the whole neighborhood. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be small. And that is a freedom no board can regulate.